I'd like to end on the note of shared interests. Do you believe that it is possible for us to actually have shared interests in this highly polarized world that we live in? I mean, the problems we are facing to a large extent is driven by the polarization, personality, governments, ideologies, and so on and so forth, you know. So if we want to focus on shared interests, empathy, trying to understand why China, India, for example, appear to be dragging their feet. Is it because they are not committed to the idea? Is it because they don't share the same interests, or is it because they have certain realities that they are facing? For example, feeding over a billion people.
Yeah, that's a question I have myself as like a writer and storyteller, because I do believe that, at the end of the day, we all as humans have that very core value of just more cheesy terms like love or for climate change, maybe climate like survival. That I think is a shared interest that brings everyone together, and the conflicts that are happening are more about who's going to not survive first. So it's like these impacts already happening, but people are just kind of waiting on it, who's to go first. So I think just digging deeper into that shared interest of, I guess, I mean, it's hard to say as youth, because I really believe in that, I don't understand a lot of politicians either, because you kind of try to figure out how can you as a decision maker make this decision that hurts so like millions of lives. But I think, there must be a day when we must come to the shared interest, whether that be what someone has mentioned about, it might be the day where we're all about to die, but I hope not.
Yeah, I think, I mean, at its heart, right, I mean, the thing I'd like to emphasize here just as a takeaway is that, decarbonization today is worth a lot more than decarbonization in the future, and that's based on climate science, not on policy or not on economics. So I think, there's some hope to say that, the curve can be bent faster and that action can be coordinated faster, but ultimately, sort of the real question is, long-term commitments. This is a gradual shift. It takes change, but it takes time, but it needs to happen as rapidly as possible. And the dividends to do it as rapidly as possible are very present, both from a climate science perspective and from an economics perspective.
Well, what is our shared interest?
Yeah.
These polarizations. Our shared interest is one. It's only one only, which is Earth, unless you want to fly somewhere and live in Mars. But if we go back to the COP26, the COP26 package is actually one smart thing about COP26 package is it's actually being designed to be complementary and mutually reinforcing, including to stop deforestation. So my key takeaway right now is probably for all of us, including the youth members, ask your government to have those embedded in national policies, laws, and regulations with clear roadmap definitions, indicators, and transparency. Because it's not just being tacky and everything else. The real people are actually suffering. Right now, as we speak, for more than a month, people in some areas in East Kalimantan, they live underwater. Their house is underwater for more than a month. As we speak right now, people are suffering. Real people, they lose home, they lose life. This is what we're talking about. So we want everybody to just press your government, press companies to take the real action on the ground. Thanks.
These large countries is economic. And this is what I mentioned off the top of the show, why China seems to be dragging is because they're undergoing an economic recovery from the pandemic, and coal seems to be the quick and an easy answer to that. So it's a larger issue. It's a bigger kind of problem to address when you involve the economics of things. But to look at the shared interest from this perspective too, I think it's very important to be reminded of the success of shared interest with respect to the Montreal Protocol. This was a very good example of where the triumvirate of the scientific community, the public sector, and the corporate sector came together and shared their respective interests to come up with a solution to the depletion of ozone in our atmosphere. And
Right.
basically, they identified, CFCs and HFCs as being the
Yes.
culprits. That's what science did. And then government said, well, we should ban it. And the corporate sector, they resisted at first, saying, no, we need to make hairspray. That's how we make our money. And then they said, well, what if? Then science came back with a solution. And they said, well, what about pump spray instead of
Yeah.
propellant spray? See, that it's actually cheaper to produce. And then the business world said, it's cheaper, our profits will go up by doing this environmentally sound thing. We're in. And that's when everybody came together, and that's why the Montreal Protocol and the banning of CFCs and HFCs was the very first internationally signed agreement by every single country in the world. And we tend to forget that, but I think that model should be applied to the crisis we're going through now. If we can find a solution that keeps everybody happy, then we can actually start banning things and end the climate crisis once and for all.
Entirely in agreement with the notion that on the issue of the climate crisis and the other two existential challenges, which is how to deal with the collapse of nature and biodiversity, or how to deal with systemic inequity and systemic discrimination, there is too much polarization. And in fact, on the climate topic, 97% of the world's scientists agree to the substantiating evidence about the nature of the emergency. So I don't think it is controversial. And the fact that 195 countries came together and signed the Paris Accord or the COP26 agreement is clear proof that there is really not much differences of opinion on why we should change and what we need to change to. All that is very clear. I think the key issue is about action. If I was a CEO of a company and I spend an overwhelming amount of time and effort and resources to come up with my mission and my purpose and my vision in terms of what we want to be, in terms of aspirations and ambitions, and that nothing in terms of how I'm going to get there, I will be sacked on the spot. Right? But
Yep.
today, the convening power of these miraculous achievements that we have had, or milestone agreements that we had in terms of UN SDGs, or the Convention on Biodiversity, or the Climate Accord, or the Global Nutrition Goals, and yet in every single one of them, we have such a massive action gap. We have to really focus on what do we need to change an enabling policy environment to induce the kind of behaviors that we all need at the individual level, at the firm level, at the sectoral level, at the national level, to make that change happen. So for me, it's all about focusing on actions, the enabling policy environment to provide the inducements to change behavior of individuals and companies and sectors. I think that's really what needs to happen if we need to really not meet again after 5 years and continue to beat our chests, saying that we all knew that this needed to happen, we all knew that we needed to change. Why the hell has the change not happened?
Thank you.
If you continue to do the same thing and expect different outcomes, we know this is a crisis. We know that everything that we've done in business as usual is not going to make an impact. We know that we need to change. And change means acting. The only way to change is to act.
Absolutely.
How do we act?
And what I'm gathering from most of you is that there's nothing wrong with I mean, COP can continue, but don't put all your eggs in one basket and believe that COP is going to give you the solutions. COP will set the tone.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Vishwa. I'm also saying that the governments have done their part. No two countries are able to come together and agree on anything that is straightforward or simple. We have 195, 197 countries coming together and agreeing on so many granular targets and goals.
Yes.
So that's a miracle in itself. They have done the heavy lifting. We need to now individually act. We need to act as firms and companies. We need to bring together our sectors. So the onus is on us.
Yes, absolutely. That's the best point to perhaps bring this discussion to a close. Thank you very much. And with that, I'd like to, on behalf of my co-moderator, Roslyn, thank my 5 panel speakers, Sunny Verghese, Dr. Mark, Terry, Aida Greenbury, Benjamin Attia, and Lynn, as well as our youth voices, Laura and Kate. And my special thanks to the rest of you for making time to join us and stay with us. International treaties are tricky matters, especially if you want everyone to have a say. Interests will differ and continue to do so. As Patricia Espinosa, Executive Secretary at the UNFCCC, put it quite aptly, negotiations are never easy. This is the nature of consensus and multilateralism. Despite criticism that COP26 achieved little, it does appear that we have no choice but to have these global conferences. They at least bring the parties together and give cooperation and partnerships a chance. What gives the process legitimacy is that almost all countries are represented, and major private and people sector players too. Very importantly, young voices are being taken seriously. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres put it most aptly in response to disappointed youths. I quote, "I know you are disappointed, but the path of progress is not always a straight line. Sometimes there are detours and sometimes there are ditches. We are in the fight of our lives, and this must be won. Never give up, never retreat, keep pushing forward." This was Inconvenient Questions, where ideas awaken.